And now we at the last session of this conference. I want to call to chair this session about the Unexpected Learning Day. Please welcome the legendary Dr. Cecilia Weissman.
Because I'm the oldest in our team, really older than all of them. That's why he keeps saying legendary, legendary. The other day I received my senior card. It's really a strong impact in somebody's identity to get the senior card, senior resident card. Anyway, we are getting to the end of Shaping the Future 2022. And the last session is actually about, okay, all this is amazing. I actually learned a lot today. I hope you all did too and you all enjoyed. But we now would like to say, how can you transform all these ideas, all these solutions, all these reflections and a lot of knowledge here into real actions to actually make a change to the practice and change the lives of students. And we call it the Unexpected Learning Day. The Unexpected Learning Day actually is a concept that came out of a group of people, many of them are here, that we were trying to think after COVID, how can we help change? And Betsy, actually the chair of the earlier session, came with this idea of the gift. She said, everyone is so tired. COVID was so traumatic to all of us. Teachers were soldiers in front of the battle without resources, without being ready to be there. Students were desperate. Parents for the first time had to really be on top of kids' education and teach them every day. So actually what we should is try to think of a gift. Try to simplify how things should be when they go back. Nobody wants to go back. There's a sort of inertia that people want to go back to a sort of less uncomfortable situation. But everyone knows up to 2019, things were not good. Students were not happy with what they were getting. They were happy coming to school, meeting teachers developing empathy to the people, to friends, to teachers, but they were not really receiving the learning, the education they thought they would. So the Unexpected Day came from the idea of a gift to the educational system, to schools, to try to think, how can we start small, create one activity in my school that is transformational, that is different, that provides to all the school community motivation to believe we can change, we can meet the needs that are not being met. So that's how the idea was born. And actually here in Israel and actually in other countries in the world, we've been trying to talk about the idea of starting small. Later we are going to have panelists that are going to discuss about this idea. And yesterday was the hackathon? Yeah, yesterday, sorry, I'm a bit tired. And yesterday we actually had a hackathon in Yerucham that we invited all the speakers that were here today and all of you actually, and the ones that could come, 120 people. And we brought real challenges. We invited schools, universities to come and bring real challenges. And during only a few hours, was the hackathon of one day, till the end, we actually tried to envision and offer solutions or ways to meet these needs. So I would like, please, to show the movie that we did very quick as well yesterday to be able to share with all of you what we did yesterday.
We have an excellent group of 120 participants, each one going to be part of a dream team that will try to solve real big problems of schools that are also participating in our hackathon. And hopefully we're going to end this day with the breakthroughs and ideas that we could not imagine beforehand. I believe it's going to be an exceptional day.
We have a great challenge right now, which is that we had spent 2 decades really beginning to do hands-on education, project-based learning, getting out of the classroom, asking authentic questions. The problem is, thanks to COVID, everybody wants to improve math and reading scores. So honestly, I would put my money into getting kids out of the classroom and really learning about the world, about experiencing things, and not be obsessed with the test scores.
One of the biggest challenges, it doesn't matter what socioeconomic strata you live in, or it doesn't matter how much education you have, none of us has a single sheet of music of all of the things that I've learned or all of my achievements. I think that that's one of the most concrete challenges.
Challenge areas that I think is most important going forward is to even expand more to the opportunities of bringing more and more of the population into the world of education.
My mom was a teacher, and I know that my own life was transformed because of the amazing teachers I had. So even though we live in a digital world, using technology to solve some of these problems around feedback, parental communication, report generation will really make the teacher's life easier.
I think our system was designed for schools to demand of kids what schools wanted. But our kids are now different kinds of learners. So I want to invest in programs and technologies that help kids lead their own learning and help them grow into the people they are with the curiosity they were born with, able to translate that curiosity into the things they want to do in the world.
I really have a very, very big dream to solve one of the traditional pains of education for all times. In every average class, at least 2/3 of the students, they need the personalization, they need adaptive learning. My dream is to solve it in the educational field, and I'm full of hope because I think technology is going there.
I think that pressing global challenges require diverse teams with different and complementary expertise. And this hackathon, I think, really illustrates the power of coming together to solve real, authentic challenges. So having clear challenges, clear goals, and diverse teams bringing together their best ideas to solve them is the future. This is what schools should be doing.
Yeah. Bringing people together from very different backgrounds and literally putting them in the same room for an intensive 8-hour experience is priceless. It's hugely valuable, and it gives us an opportunity to also learn how to listen better. And when you're thrown into a room with people who are policymakers or young students, as I am here today, it really is a pleasure just to kind of sit and listen for a little bit as to where they are starting and what their mindset is.
So the experience here has been absolutely wonderful. We are, together, folks that don't know each other, people with a challenge from a real school with real students and real teachers, and that's incredibly impactful because we're bringing diverse perspectives from all over the globe.
This was great. It's great to be in a room with people who have different skills and different perspectives. We're coming together to talk about a problem I know nothing about, and I'm learning, and I feel like I'm contributing too, and I feel like I'm part of something. And it fuels me with energy to do all kinds of things beyond that. And if we're lucky, maybe we're gonna come up with a solution that helps this school too. You took me out of the challenge to do this interview, and we're trying to solve a big problem. So I'm gonna go back to the room after I'm done talking to you.
The experience here with Mindset in Israel is actually really amazing. So it's great. I'm happy to be here.
This is actually Mindset in Yeruham that is also part of our work. So it's a house for all of you. That's what we want, all of you to come there and do amazing things like the ones we try to do. I would like to invite, it's my honor to invite Eli Horowitz, Executive Director of the Trump Foundation, has been a supporter always of Shaping the Future. Eli, please come on stage. I would like to invite as well Dr. Tamar Elkeles that came from the States also to share her knowledge with us. She's Chief Learning and Talent in different companies. And I would like to invite also Dr. Ishai Moore, who is a consultant of education innovation. I'm going to enjoy more. Okay, I set the stage for the conversation, but I would like to start with Tamar Elkeles. Each one of the panelists will provide a very different perspective of how we think we should go about tomorrow, actually transforming and helping schools to get better. So we are going to start with Tamar Elkeles, and she's going to talk a little bit about her perspective.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Shalom Chaverim. I'm thrilled to be here. So I need to tell you, first of all, Ani mevina ivrit, aval ani lo medaberet ivrit. So if you're talking about me in the audience, I know what you're saying, so be careful, okay? Okay, so I wanted to share with you quickly, I've spent the last 30 years working in learning and development at the corporate level. I worked 25 years at Qualcomm. I know that's kind of crazy to think because I'm only 30, but I spent 25 years at Qualcomm building an award-winning learning organization. So I'm in education, but I'm all about corporate education. And so for me, what I'm providing for you today is some perspective about what I'm dealing with the people that you are educating that are coming to my workforce. I'm responsible for hiring them, I'm responsible for developing them, I'm responsible for retaining them. So I want to share with you what I've learned. So this is big picture, what's going on with business today? One of the biggest things is so much disruption, so much change, governmental changes. We have wars going on. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so I think it's really important for us to all really understand that businesses in general are struggling right now with all of the uncertainty and change and disruption that they're feeling. So what does that do for us in the learning and the education space? So one of the things that we're struggling with is the future of work. We, all of us, are developing people for jobs that do not exist yet. We're dealing with that in our organizations. You're dealing with that as your students. We're also trying to figure out how do we create a learning ecosystem, a place where learning matters, where we're going to reward and reinforce you for learning. We're going to promote you in organizations for the more knowledge and the more learning that you have. And so we need to figure out what does that ecosystem look like. And then the last one is around capacity. So I know that we've spoken a lot today about skill sets and building skills. I don't think we should be building skills. I think we need to be building capacity. Capacity to think, capacity to learn. Skills, we're not hiring for skills anymore in the corporate setting. We're hiring for your attitude and your ability to learn. If we look at what's been happening over the past couple of years, most of us have been struggling with this, what I'm going to call post-traumatic stress disorder. We're in the office, we're not in the office, we're hybrid, we're working from home. We're having these challenges of trying to figure out what are the new ways of working. And if we look at what's going on in the US today, about 60% of the US workforce is going into the office at least some of the time. But 35% of US workers are staying home. Now that's a massive challenge for someone like me who's in talent and in learning. How do I train people if I have some in the office and some at home? How do I manage a hybrid working environment? How do I manage a full-on remote environment? So we're definitely struggling with these new ways of working. The other piece is gig economy, and many of you are familiar with this. I'm sure it's like that here in Israel as well, but we have more than 41 million Americans that are independent workers. That means they do not have a full-time job. They are doing multiple jobs. They could be working for Intel at Qualcomm at the same time. They're working for Uber and Lyft, or Uber and Get. You have Get here. So understand what that's doing. It's challenging us to think about how do we manage these workers, and then realizing that by 2030, only 9% of the workforce in the US is going to be full-time. That's a massive challenge. How are we going to train and educate and develop those people? I think this was mentioned earlier in one of my colleagues' presentations around the average number of jobs that this next generation is going to have is somewhere between 8 and 12. That changes a lot. That's why I say skills are less important than actually developing career capability, developing employability, not necessarily for a specific skill set, because if you're changing jobs this often, and we have students that are going to be learning lots of different skill sets, they can't be specialized. It really has to be much more generalized. Today, 54% of employees believe that they currently have all the skills they need. So they've been educated by you, they come to my workforce, they go, I have everything I need. I don't need to learn anything more or anything different. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's the research, okay? 74% believe it's my responsibility to get all of the learning that I need. It's not the responsibility of any of us educators in here, nor is it the responsibility of the employers. So if I have all the skill sets I need and it's my responsibility to go get the learning, what are we doing in the corporate world? What are you doing with education? The average shelf life of a skill is only 5 years. What we are doing, most of us in the education space, is on this left side here. We are focusing on knowledge at a benchmark level. We're focusing on developing a skill. What I would challenge you to think about is moving beyond that and really focusing on capability as well as capacity. Because when you build capacity, we're building human value. We are in the human value era. It's no longer machines that are producing money in organizations and for economies. It's people. And if we think about that, what we really need to be doing is helping people think differently, not building a skill like math or science, but it's how do we think about the world, how do we think about things in context. Realizing that you may have many different jobs in your career, that means I need to learn how to think, and that's super important. McKinsey did a report recently that nearly 1/3 of today's work can be done by technology or by a robot potentially. So what we need to be thinking about is what are we doing to educate and train our students so that they have the capability for learning, so that they have capability for cognitive processing and for creativity. And as we think about these robots that may be coming, 35% of current jobs may be displaced. That's because we're not going to be able to have this thinking and this judgment that needs to happen. It's going to be done from a machine. So how we create, how we deliver, and how we consume learning has changed, and the workforce has changed as well. So let's just look at this. So I'm going to ask a question of the audience. This is data from Common Sense. Do you guys know commonsensemedia.org? Common Sense, amazing organization that does a lot for education in the US. But this is data from 0 to 8-year-olds with their own mobile devices. They own their own mobile devices. Now, when I look at this data, I say, okay, how is it possible a 0 to 1-year-old, 0 to 1, okay? 0 to 1 does not read, okay? But they have a mobile device. Now, does anyone in this room know of a child 0 to 1 that has a mobile device? It's part of this 10% that has a mobile device. Yes? Raise your hand. What? A digital pacifier. Okay, so tell me, what is this 0 to 1-year-old that you know of? What are they doing with that device? They can't read. Music, what else? Movies, what else? Colors. Now, how did they learn? Who trained them to use that device? Did they look at a training manual? No. Did they read a book? Did they go to a training class? No. How did they learn to do that? By what? They were watching us. They were watching their parents. And what were they watching us do? This. Right? They went, I do this, and things start to happen. I don't need to read. I don't need to go to the class. I don't need to have a trainer tell me how to do it. I don't need a coach. All I need to do is this and watch somebody. Think about the power of learning, the optics of what they're doing. That is learning by doing. That's learning by watching someone else. They don't have to read, but they're able to do this. Just because they have a finger, they're able to go ahead and use any kind of device. So interesting, when we think about this is the generation that is coming into my workforce. These are my interns that are coming in a few years to my workforce. So today's learners growing up doing things like listening to music, they're watching movies, they're looking at photos on a mobile device. And so they grow up digital natives. Now, do they want to sit in my classroom experience in my corporate technology role? Not necessarily. They want something that looks very different. So what's happening in the enterprise, and so many people have talked about that here as well, there's a massive amount of immersive learning that's happening. So companies like Shell and Verizon and Bank of America are doing amazing things with immersive learning. So these younger children that have these mobile devices that are immersing themselves into technology are now also doing that in the workplace. The other piece that's really important is social learning. It used to be, I used to deliver training classes. I had thousands of training classes at Qualcomm that I delivered. We had manuals, we had learning management systems, we had lots of curriculum and content. Where was the #1 place that our employees went to get information? Google. It wasn't my training classes. We threw away lots of training classes because we realized they were not coming to our programs, they weren't coming to get trained. They were like that child, the 0 to 1-year-old that's just watching other people doing it. They were going to Google. How many of you, when you have an ailment or something that's wrong or you're sick, you go to Google Doctor, right? And it tells you all of the things that are wrong with you. You start to diagnose yourself, right? We're starting to learn that way. So when we think about what's happening, these kids are going from games like Minecraft and Roblox, and now they're also utilizing YouTube and Masterclass. And all of this is changing the landscape of the future of learning. In the US, you probably would not have heard of this, but there was a child that was 5 years old. They got in the car and took the 3-year-old little sister and drove her to McDonald's. And the police came because this little child shows up at the drive-in window, and the police came and said, "Excuse me, son, what are you doing? You're driving a car here." "My sister was hungry." "Son, how did you learn to drive the car?" "YouTube. YouTube. 5-year-old, I learned on YouTube how to drive the car. My sister was hungry. I can get in the car and drive myself to McDonald's." This is what's happening. So when I think about what we're doing from an education standpoint, we have to take into consideration this is the future of work and the future of learning. This is very interesting. There's a massive amount of power in social learning. So today, I'll use McDonald's again. On Facebook, user-generated content has 7 times more engagement than brand itself. So if McDonald's puts an ad that says, "Look at this amazing hamburger and this is great," and if I put an ad on Facebook saying, "I'm eating this hamburger and I love this hamburger," 7 times more engagement that you will go to McDonald's looking at my video than looking at McDonald's. You're going to listen to me. You don't know me at all, but you're going to see me eating this. The influence, the engagement that you have on these social media platforms is 7 times higher than what the brands are doing. So what are the brands doing? Hiring influencers, hiring people to go sell to you. So it's not their money for advertising anymore. It's other people, because that's a bigger level of influence. So as I think about us from a learning standpoint, why don't we do the same with education and learning? Why don't we use influencers to help share the knowledge of what it is that we want other people to learn? If we realize there's more engagement through others, then we should also utilize that for our own learning. So this is interesting. The Harvard Graduate School of Education did a list of the next generation skills. Okay, so this is the list of what they came up with, the top 20-something, okay? Now I want you to tell me from this list, take a minute, what do you think is the #1 in order of importance? This is not an order of importance, this is just up there. What's #1, the most important future skill based on the research done by Harvard Graduate School of Education? Communication, what else? Say it louder. All right, I'm gonna show you the list. #1 is thinking. #2 is self-understanding. #3 is ethics. #4 is ethics, empathy, and 5 is communication. Those are the top 5. Is that what we're teaching today in our classrooms? Or are we teaching skills? You see the problem. So to me, it's critically important for us to understand we are trying to build capacity. And if we're trying to build capacity, this is the future of learning. New ways of working, new ways of learning, emerging technologies are making a massive difference and leading the way for a critical learning transformation. So what I think is important for us to understand is the future of learning is in our hands together collectively. I'm here to help you, you're here to help me. As an ecosystem, looking at education and then looking at what I'm doing, training and learning within organizations, we need to rethink, what are we teaching? How are we teaching it? And why are we teaching it? And focus on building capacity, looking at social learning to influence people to learn, immersive learning and how we can utilize that, and really, really focusing on critical thinking. Thank you very much. Toda rabah.
Thank you so much, Tama. Because you don't have the time, I want to throw the ball immediately. First to Ellie. Tamar talked about, how, what should we be doing in schools to transform. I know that many things that she said we could question. I know very well your work. But before going to the content of what we should be doing, I would also like to talk about the how, because you've been very influent in Israel about how to bring transformations to, let's say, the public system. I think one of the biggest concerns after COVID-19 was the digital divide, was the fact that very quickly many students were able to, actually even during COVID, to have access to things, but many did not. So I would like you to talk a little bit about the how. If we have to respond to the needs, how should we go about and doing it?
Challenging. Thank you for staying. For a brief moment, several years ago, when the COVID lockdowns were all around, if you put a camera in each of our living rooms, in some of our living rooms, and you would say parents working, high-tech employee preparing a presentation for a board meeting, or else you would see a student, a 10th grade student, preparing a presentation for the next day's homework, actually it would look the same. And for many years we complained that schools are very different from the workplace and that the gap is widening, but for a brief moment it looked almost the same. But when we looked deeper, everyone, we saw that, yeah, it was the high-tech employee working and the advanced mathematics students doing the same work, having the capacities of the digital world. And in Israel, the high-tech sector grew by more than 11% during COVID lockdowns. So people with these capacities were able to maintain some sort of work. And these type of students were able to maintain some sort of learning. But these are the minority of students and employees, and others were melting down into the sofas with Instagram and Netflix and increasing the gaps. And I think that the most striking question is, and my perspective is, coming from philanthropy, so probably most of you would not share this, but the question is how change happens. Really, how systems change. And it's a matter of time and space. I know we heard a lot about it today, but it's also a question of who. Who do you ask? If you ask academics from universities, they would say that they would do an experiment and publish an essay with recommendations, and people would read, and then change somehow would happen. If you ask policymakers, they would say we will create legislation and incentives and budgets, and then everything will just sort of happen. But it doesn't happen. And if you ask entrepreneurs, most of you are entrepreneurs, you would say we would create an entrepreneurial innovation and we would disrupt the system. Everybody waited for you guys during COVID to save the system, because you said that all these factors of schools were hurdles along the way, and now no learning was able to happen without technology. So that was your time, guys, and you lost it. You lost it because you were entrepreneurial and you offered disruption. And actually the system wanted to be saved, not to be disrupted. So it went back to its old or some sort of new normal. If you ask NGOs or companies what create change, they would say a supply of programs. Let's create a pilot program, and somehow it would be scaled up by someone else. So when you look at all these people, everybody's right, but you need a village. You need everyone together in order to create change. This didn't happen during COVID because everyone were preoccupied with survival. And it's not happening today in schools as well. They're back to normal. It happens in the workplace, it happens in universities. You see students in higher education learning differently, but schools are not there. With this optimistic note.
So yes, but how you think so? It didn't happen. We know the system wasn't capable of responding. So how do you think we should enable this change?
From our perspective, we're into math. That's the old skill. So we look back at the curriculum and the testing in the Israel school system. And after COVID, it was evident that it was not meaningful enough for students nor for teachers, because we teach procedural fluency and abstract thinking in our mathematics curriculum. That's 1/3 of the jobs are being done by technology. We're teaching our kids to calculate, but computers and robots do it better. So we saw that other countries around the world changed their curriculum. Curriculum is a top-down vehicle to change, and Israel is very centralized, and teacher training and testing. And the Ministry of Education is now looking very seriously, deeply into changing the middle school curriculum for it to be connected to real-world problems, because everybody saw that during COVID, if your learning was not self-regulated, if you didn't have enough inherent motivation to learn, you didn't do it. But if you found the stuff going on with your teacher interesting, connected to your world, not just learning about exponential growth, but rather than how a virus spreads. So that's suddenly relevant. So how an autonomous car works, and how GPS systems work, and how missiles interact with each other, and how genetics work. These are interesting stuff for many students, and it's all mathematics. And so Israel is now changing its mathematics curriculum. It's a deep, top-down effort. Technology will be part of it, not the magical whatever, but we need everyone on board. Teacher training, policymakers, technology people, teachers, and so forth.
No doubt. I'm going to take you in the last question, and actually I would like to ask you, Shai. I think there's one, I know that you meant, but the learner, the student, in all the elements you mentioned. And I think there's a sort of, I wouldn't say crash, but a sort of parallel world happening here. I think Tamar mentioned that a little bit when she was talking about the YouTube, or the ways we all learn today, as you said, when we need something, and still the response of the system. Trying to analyze, as you said, I mean, those are the needs, and that's how I'm going to respond. But there's something here that is not really talking to each other. There's something, the learner is in the middle of this confusion. It's not really, the market is changing, and who is really helping the learner to meet these two worlds, the labor market, education. I feel he's a little bit lost, or she, we don't know, or we don't know the gender. So, Ishai, I would like you to talk a little bit from the side of the learner. I mean, how can we provoke a change, or what should we be doing to actually respond to a very emerging need from the clash that has happened between the labor market and the education system?
It is working. Is it possible to bring back the slide from the future of learning skills?
Sure. Yes, can you guys bring a slide up?
I want to, Tamar knows what slide, but it's just kind of getting it back up with the
the presentation of Tamar.
So while Tamar or whoever manages that, I'm going to use this amazing technology. Do you know it?
Yeah.
So this technology allows me to warp the chronotope and bring things that happened earlier today into the discussion.
Yeah, here. Right?
The next one with the sorted one. One more? Yeah. But while you... I want the rated one.
Oh yeah, that's after this. Yes.
Yeah, the next one.
The next
So
one.
I want to go back to Tamar's amazing story about that 5-year-old that drove his sister to McDonald's. And what's interesting, I think most people kind of took the message of, oh, cool, a 5-year-old kid learned to drive from YouTube. What I took is something else. A 5-year-old kid learned that if hungry, drive to McDonald's. That, for me, is much more amazing and critical. And I think that goes back to what Christina was saying about school as the cumulative cultural reproduction device. So the really key question is, what kind of culture are we reproducing? And this is where I have a problem with this whole narrative about employers and employees, because as an employee, I'm either a consumer or a resource, right? But I'm aiming to educate people as concerned citizens. Not just, and I think it's really, the capacity to learn, to think, critical, but even more so the capacity to live and to act. To understand what kind of world I want to live in and how do I bring that world to be. And those skills, which is amazing because those come from the corporate world, understanding what I need in the new or the future employee, it actually converges with what I think I need in the future concerned citizen.
It's interesting that you say that because, can you hear me? Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because in today's world, employees want to work for a company that has purpose and that aligns with their values.
Yeah.
And so if I'm doing something good for the world and doing something that will provide a service beyond my company, they feel better about that. People will join a company that they feel is actually doing something to change the world.
So I think we really need to go back to talking about values.
Yes.
And about, giving children the opportunity to understand, again, what kind of world do I want to live in? How do I make it happen? And the only way to learn those 5 essential skills is by experiencing them. You can't learn to think from a textbook. You can't learn to problem solve or to empathize from YouTube. You need to do it. You need to have the opportunity to actually, and this is what we were doing yesterday in that, unexpected day. Give children the opportunity to actually do something meaningful in the world and then develop those skills through that.
Like case studies do that, right? So instead of teaching an actual skill, creating a case study and allowing different kids to think about how would I solve that problem? What would I do differently? How could I contribute? And there there's no right answer. Several different answers.
And I think that's, in a way, what's happening today. When you said you learn about doing, I think, was mentioned here today, actually in several different ways. I think exactly because of the frustration of all these parallel worlds happening, which are too many. Kids at the end are driving the car to go to McDonald's, which is a very radical example. I could talk a lot about that as well. There's many interpretations for that, but so let's forget that example and go to other ones, but that's what's happened. That's why they are like, it always bothered me. No, people, they are in the internet, let's give gamification. It's because they want, no. They are there because that's where they learn things that they want to learn. Yep. Kids learn all the time and they need things and they go there and that's where they learn. Kids want to learn. It bothers me. So till we start discussing from this side, the other side, I think there, like you said at the end, we need to understand each other, and education has also to open up, to be less scared, I think, of listening to the learner, listening to the labor market. We discussed this in the beginning of the morning about if we should be adapting education to the labor market or not, and there was a lot of discussion about that. But all these discussions, I think, will help us move forward. And especially, as somebody also said in the morning, listen to the needs of the kids, of the schools, trying to transform from their needs, from what they say they need.
If I may just think, one talk in the morning really bothered me, and that was that really amazing talk about Dreamscape. I think it was very impressive technologically, but I was thinking, we're living in a world that is on the verge of ecological collapse. there are real issues which require me to engage in STEM subjects. And instead of that, we're putting them in the heuristic park. You know, I think the key is to really engage them with the world they live in, and then they acknowledge that they need these skills or capacities, and then give them the tools to self-develop themselves to these skills and capacities.
Let's move to the questions. Let's see, how can I join the Unboxing School movement? Yeah, talk to us. I mean, that actually would be great. There's actually lots of magazines written by lots of people, not only Matah and mindset of people that are doing the movement. The magazines, I don't know where they are anymore, but yeah, anyone can. What's the importance of audiovisual experience to the future of learning? Tamar, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, all of that's important. I mean, I think one of the possibilities is asking your students, how do you want to learn? How do you learn best? How do you want to be evaluated when you go to the workplace? How do you want to be trained when you go into the workplace? I mean, one of the things we need to do is be asking the students, but I do think video is super important, VR, AI, machine learning, all of that is important. The technology is an enabler. It is not the end all. I think, again, it's about helping people learn to think. Gaming, I think, is critically important because we're growing up with a generation that's doing it. And, you know, earlier was talked about a TikTok for adults. I'm offended by that remark, okay, because I think we should all be using the same tools. It's not those are for kids and we're the adults. I want to be just like that also. So let's all play in the same sandbox and maybe get on Roblox and get on some of the gaming to really understand where our kids are and where the future is.
Ellie,
and
maybe
this
you...
last piece, I just want to mention quickly, a bunch of people are saying here a measurement. How do we measure? How do we assess? Measurement and assessment is something that we do as educators that I think stifles us. Stop trying to measure and assess. We do that as a way to make ourselves feel better that we got the grade or we should not be doing that anymore. Thinking you can't measure, you can't assess that. So I would suggest stop measuring and assessing. Don't look for measurements and assessments to do that. I think the thing is, can you show that your students are performing better by learning more? Or are they able to critically think differently because they have new ideas? But not about measurement and assessment.
Do you want to take that, Ali?
I'm learning a new language here that you're all familiar with. For me, unboxing was the thing that I was doing on TikTok when I got my new Nike shoes and I opened it for everyone to see.
You haven't spoken to us for a long time.
And I love the idea of multiple identities or of quantum identities, of having multiple identities at the same time in different places and so forth. And I think we should remember that kids, those driving to McDonald's or using the digital pacifier, have an identity that they were trained for. As students in a classroom, they know how to play the game when they enter school. They are supposed to be quiet. They are expecting the teacher to dictate and they sum up. And when teachers are not doing this, they are the first to complain that teachers are not doing their job. So there's a gap here between the talk and the wide agreement that things need to be radically changed, and the fact that we are all also students. You're all sitting so quietly for the past hour and a half as if you were 19th century students. So there is this identity within us, and it's not just that we agree and we will be happy with innovations that gives us a sense of an idea. It's about a much deeper change and a much deeper coalition, wider coalitions that need to be built outside the walls of this beautiful conference.
Thank you so much. We have to wrap up. Please don't go. We're going to wrap up with you all here. I would like to thank everyone again, this amazing panel. I think we touched many critical points, but you know, we had to move around. We don't have much time. Ilan, is Ilan here? I pass the ball to you now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the participants, for all the guests. Thank you, Cecilia, Dr. Cecilia Weissman, for organizing this amazing conference. And Before we say goodbye, I want to invite you all to our booth, CET booth in Expo Chinuch exhibition here at Expo Tel Aviv. תערוכת אקספו חינוך, יש דוכן מרשים מאוד למטח, גם מיינדסט מיוצגים שם. אתם מוזמנים, שילמתם כבר על חנייה, אז אתם מוזמנים כבר להיכנס לביתן אחת וליהנות מהתערוכה שם ומהדוכן של מטח. תודה רבה לכם על ההשתתפות, ולמעוניינים מתארגנת תפילת מנחה בחוץ. תודה רבה, חודש טוב.